At the auction, men laughed as a scarred dog lunged at his chain, a sign above him declaring, "The devil's beast." No one wanted him, except one cowboy. When he raised his hand and said, "I'll take him," the crowd gasped. What happened next shocked everyone. The dusty town square buzzed with noise as ranchers and traders gathered around the wooden auction stand. Horses whinnied in the distance, boots shuffled on cracked boards, and the sharp cry of the auctioneer cut through the air. Cattle, tools, and even saddles went quickly to eager buyers. Then came the dog, dragged onto the platform by two men. A massive, scarred shepherd mix fought against the chain around his neck. His teeth bared, his growls thundered through the crowd. Mothers pulled their children closer, men shook their heads, and whispers spread fast. "Meanest beast in the county. Should have been put down long ago." The auctioneer's voice faltered as the dog lunged, rattling the chain. No one raised a hand. No one dared. But at the back of the crowd, leaning casually against a post, stood a cowboy. Silent, steady. His eyes never left the dog. The dog stood trembling with rage, his chest heaving, muscles straining against the chain that bound him. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle, a testament to countless fights for survival. His fur was matted, his eyes wild, yet behind that fury flickered something deeper: pain, betrayal, and fear. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow, voice cracking as he called out, $1. Who'll give a single dollar for the beast?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Worthless. Too dangerous. He'll tear a man apart." Murmurs turned to jeers as people mocked the snarling animal. No hand went up. No bidder dared claim him. Chained and alone, the dog barked furiously, confirming every cruel word spoken about him. Yet while the crowd saw only a monster, the cowboy saw something else, an untamed spirit trapped in iron and fear. And in that moment, a decision was already forming in his mind. The auctioneer's voice grew more desperate with each passing second. "Come on now, folks. Just $1. Surely someone wants him." But the crowd only backed away, shaking their heads. The dog lunged again, his snarl echoing through the square, and laughter erupted. "Not worth the rope around his neck." A rancher shouted. "Crazy fool would have to be mad to take him home." Another barked. That's when the cowboy stepped forward. The crowd parted as his boots crunched against the dirt. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, but his calm, steady presence silenced the mockery. Without hesitation, he raised a gloved hand. "I'll take him." A hush fell. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The auctioneer blinked, stunned, before hammering down the gavel. "Sold, for $1. Voices exploded at once. "He's lost his mind. He won't last a week." But the cowboy ignored them all. He walked straight to the snarling dog, unflinching, and wrapped his hand around the chain. For a brief moment, man and beast locked eyes, and the cowboy whispered words no one else could hear. And just like that, the most hated dog at the auction had a new master. The walk back to the ranch was far from easy. The dog pulled hard against the chain, growling at every sound, his body coiled like a spring ready to attack. But the cowboy never yanked or shouted. He simply held steady, speaking in a low, calm voice with every step. When they arrived at the ranch, the dog refused food. He snarled when water was placed before him, turning his head as if expecting a trick. Each night, he paced in circles, restless, never letting his guard down. To the townsfolk who heard, it was proof the cowboy had made a mistake. But the cowboy saw something else. He sat near the pen each evening, hat tilted low, talking softly. He never raised his hand, never showed fear. Days passed, and slowly, the dog began to pause his pacing, his ears flicking toward the sound of that steady voice. One morning, instead of growling, the dog sat quietly, watching the cowboy sip his coffee. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the beginning. For the first time, the beast looked less like an enemy, and more like a soul waiting for someone to believe in him. It was a moonless night when trouble came. The ranch lay quiet, the cattle resting in the pasture, when the dog suddenly stiffened. His ears shot up, his body rigid. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not aimed at the cowboy this time, but at the darkness beyond the fence. The cowboy followed. His gaze. Shadows moved where no man should be. Rustlers. Before the cowboy could even reach for his rifle, the dog lunged forward, snapping the air with ferocity. His barks tore through the night, sending the cattle into a frenzy. The rustlers cursed, trying to drive the herd, but the dog was faster. He charged, teeth flashing, forcing the intruders back. One man swung a whip, striking across his flank. The dog yelped, but didn't falter. He stood his ground, buying precious seconds. The cowboy fired a warning shot, sending the rustlers fleeing. Into the dark, when silence finally returned, the dog collapsed, panting, blood trickling from his side. The cowboy knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. For the first time, the beast had chosen not to fight his master, but to fight for him. And in that moment, loyalty was born. The cowboy carried the wounded dog back to the ranch, his arms steady despite the animal's weight. He laid him gently on a blanket in the barn, cleaned his wound, and whispered, "Easy now, partner. You did good." For the first time, the word partner reached the dog's ears, instead of growling. The shepherd whimpered softly, eyes following every move the cowboy made. The man offered water again, and this time, the dog drank. It was a small act, but it felt like a breakthrough. A wall of fear and anger finally beginning to crack. Days turned into weeks. The once hated dog now walked beside the cowboy on morning rounds, head held high. At night, instead of pacing, he curled near the porch, keeping watch over the ranch. His snarls had transformed into protective growls when strangers approached. Word spread quickly through town. Neighbors who once mocked the cowboy now stood at their fences, marveling. "That can't be the same beast from the auction," they whispered, but it was. The very dog everyone feared had become the cowboy's loyal guardian. Not by force, not by fear, but through patience, trust, and a bond that could no longer be broken. It wasn't long before word of the ranch raid spread. Folks at the saloon whispered about how the very dog they'd once called a menace had stood between thieves and his master. Some didn't believe it until they saw the dog themselves. When the cowboy rode into town with the shepherd trotting proudly at his side, heads turned. The same animal once dragged onto the auction stage, chained and snarling, now walked calmly, his eyes alert but no longer wild. Children pointed, tugging at their parents' sleeves. Farmers who once mocked the cowboy tipped their hats in quiet respect. Even the auctioneer, red-faced and humbled, admitted softly, "Never thought I'd see the day." The dog, once feared and hated, had earned the town's awe. And as he walked beside the cowboy, there was no doubt, this was no beast. This was a protector reborn. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, the cowboy rested a hand on his dog's back. What once was a beast chained in anger was now a loyal partner, standing tall at his side. The cowboy spoke softly, almost to himself. "There are no bad dogs, only souls waiting for someone to believe in them." The town had doubted, mocked, even feared. But the truth stood before them, undeniable. The most hated dog at the auction had become a hero. And sometimes, the ones the world rejects are the very ones meant to change everything. Weeks passed, and the bond between cowboy and dog grew stronger with every sunrise. The townsfolk no longer called him Beast. Instead, they spoke his name with reverence, telling the story of the auction where one man's faith turned fury into loyalty. Children would run to the ranch fence, calling for the dog, who now wagged his tail instead of baring his teeth. Neighbors who once feared him now left scraps of meat by the gate. As a gesture of respect, the cowboy simply smiled whenever someone asked how he tamed the wildest dog in the county. "Didn't tame him," he'd say, tipping his hat. "Just gave him a chance." And so the legend grew, not of a monster, but of a protector reborn. A story whispered in every corner of town. Sometimes, the fiercest hearts only need one person brave enough to see their worth.